what is happening to your 401k? Are companies decreasing the percentage that they match for your contributions? Are vesting schedules changing? And are companies in general getting rid of 401ks? Let's talk about it. So let's first talk about the company match. So the company match is essentially when you put money into a 401k up to a certain limit, companies will match that either dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar or whatever it is. So how have those trends changed? So according to Don't Quit Your Day Job, which is actually, it's a funny name, but it's a reputable site, the average 401k employer match in 2023 was between 4 and 6%. So if you put in 4%, a lot of companies are matching 100% of that to the first 4%. Some companies are doing up to 6%. So that's the range. But how has that changed? If we look back before the pandemic, it was actually lower. The average was 4.5% in 2020. And if we go all the way back to 2011, the average match by a company was just 3 to 4%. So the good news is the match is not going away. In fact, it's actually increasing. Okay, so why do I bring this up? We're going to talk about vesting schedules here in a second. But I want to mention that recently there was an article in USA Today titled, "Is the government going to take away my 401k? Some economists say that the accounts aren't worth it." And I did a video on this, and one of the commenters asked me, what's going on with company matches? That person thought that they were actually going down. So I'm happy to report that the company matches are going up. Now let's talk about the historical contribution limits that you can put into the 401k. Again, according to DQYDJ, which stands for don'tquityourdayjob.com, this is a chart that shows the historical 401k limits. You can see in 1978, it started off being higher, then it got ratcheted down, stayed down pretty low through the 90s, but then has been steadily going up. And I want you to look at 2024, because I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that the total contribution limit between the catch-up amount and then also the employer, that limit is actually quite high. It's just under $70,000 a year. Now, few of us are going to get that amount because it takes a very generous employer to do that. And typically, you see this when a company is very closely held, just a couple of owners are the only employees, and it's a very tax-efficient way for them to get money out of the company. You also might see this with a physician group, physicians at a university hospital. These are the places that I've seen these maximum contributions being put in place. But for average folks like you and I, we're probably not going to see a limit like that. Now, I want to show you, because again, I want to put these things on your radar screen. So it's important that when it's on your radar screen that you do a little additional research just to find out for yourself. And the best place to find out information on stuff like this is from the IRS government website. It's very user-friendly. And this is an article from the IRS called Retirement Topics, the 401k and Profit Sharing Plan Contribution Limits. And you can see in 2024, the employee contribution limit is $23,000. And then there's a catch-up contribution for people that are 50 and older, and that's $7,500. That did not change from 2023 to 2024. So the employee, if they're over 50, can actually put in $30,500, assuming that they're making at least that much. Because it's limited to 100% of the participant's compensation. Okay, but you can also see here down below that the footnote number 2 here, the annual additions to a participant plan cannot exceed $69,000. So it's actually the lesser of these two. So 100% of the participant's contribution, or $69,000, actually $76,500 when you include that over 50 contribution limit. That tells us what the match is, what the contribution limits are, what people can put into their 401k. But what about the vesting schedule? How does that work? And every company has the right to set their own vesting schedule. Some companies have no vesting schedules. Others have more onerous vesting schedules. So it's important that you know that the money that you put in to your 401k is your money. You always have access to your money. It's just the employer's money. They can put a vesting schedule on it. And it's really a way of giving you golden handcuffs, if you will, to force employees to stay more than 1 or 2 years. So a very common vesting schedule is for the company's contributions to vest over 4 years. And typically, with a schedule like that, you get 0% vesting for the first 12 months. And then it's what's called cliff vesting. After the first 12 months, you get 25% vesting of the company's contribution. So if the company had put in $4,000 and you leave in the 13th month, under this scenario, you would get $1,000 of the $4,000 that the company put in. Again, it still makes sense for you to put this money into the 401k up to the company match, because there's very few things that are going to guarantee you 100% return. And because of the vesting schedule, it's not a guaranteed 100% return. But if you do stay past that 1 year mark with this type of vesting schedule, it is a guaranteed 25% return of your money, just because you're getting your company's money. So after that first year, when you vest 25%, for each month you stay after that, you vest an additional 1 divided by 48, 48 being the 4 years times 12 months in a year. So you achieve about a little bit more than 2% per month of vesting of what your employer, what your company is putting in. So that's a very common rate. Now, how do the participants, how do you and I, how have those numbers changed? I mentioned earlier that the company contributions have actually gone up, but what's happened with the employee contribution, you and I, how has that changed? And you can see this chart here by Vanguard, which was put out in 2022. That stayed pretty constant. The median is right at 6%, and it stayed pretty steady. And the average is right at just under 7%. And the reason for that is because people that are putting in the max that they can put in for the contribution, those numbers skew it, which is why the median is lower than the average. So you can see that number there. So in general, we're keeping our contributions constant. I also thought it was interesting to see what is the value of defined contribution, which is a fancy way of saying a 401k essentially. What is the average value for a defined contribution plan? You can see, and let's just look at the medians to start off with. In 2012, it was just under $28,000, and it actually has stayed pretty constant and has gone down in several years during a period of really a time of economic growth. So it's gone from $27,000 to almost $30,000 in 2014. But then in 2015, 16, 17, and 18, it actually dropped and started going back up in 2019. And then surprisingly in 2020, it actually increased quite a bit to $33,000. And as of 2021, the median account in a defined contribution plan is a little over $35,000. Now the average is $141,000, but that number is skewed because some people might have $1 million or a large amount in their 401k. The median is $35,000. Now it's important to note that some people have multiple 401k accounts from previous employers, so this is not their total 401k balance. And sometimes people, when they leave a company, will roll their 401k into an IRA, and so then that would count in an IRA balance. And again, people sometimes have multiple 401ks. Okay, so how do these contributions work? You know, oftentimes companies have fairly simple contributions that they make to your 401k, but sometimes they get complicated. Maybe a company will say, we're going to match 100% of your contributions for the first 4%, and then we're going to match 50%, 3%. So in this example here in this chart, you can see this is a case where a company is matching 100% of your first 3% that you're contributing to your 401k. And then for 4 and 5%, they're matching 50%. So essentially, they're doing a match up to 6%. So the first 3% is 100% match, then the next 2 percentage points, they're matching 50%. So if we use the highlighted number here, you can see for the first 3%, the company's matching dollar for dollar. So if the employee put in $57.69, the company's putting in that exact amount. But for the next percentage, you know, the difference between the dollar amount with 3% and 4% is essentially $20. The company's matching half of that. So you can see that the total dollars the company match actually only went up by $10 between 3 and 4%. And then between 4 and 5%, it's an extra $20 again that gets put in. And so the company is going from $67.30 to the $76.92. And then above that, the company's matching zero. So the company match stays constant at $76.92, even though the employees' numbers continue to go up because the employee can put in more money. Again, subject to those limits that we talked about. In general, the lesser of 100% of your compensation, or $23,000 in 2024, plus if you're over 50, that's $7,500 catch up. Okay, now one of the things I said in the open is, are 401ks going away? And I talked about previously in a video about this suggestion, this thought exercise by 2 economists talking about maybe we should get rid of 401ks. And the exercise there, the reason the economist said this, is that the majority of the benefit that goes with the tax deferral is given to wealthy people. And this is a tweet by Andrew Biggs, and Andrew is an economist. You can see here the tweet got picked up by USA Today. The tweet went viral. I believe they got over 1 million views on this tweet. But Andrew Biggs talks about a paper that he and Alicia Munell did together. And one of the economists works for a think tank that's generally considered to be a little left-leaning. The other economist works for a think tank that's considered to be a little right-leaning. So the fact they did this together probably means that it's a pretty balanced report. And you can see that the tax preference for savings and retirement plans, the government is essentially foregoing $185 billion a year in 2020, according to this paper. And the source for that is Treasury estimates. And they make the argument that it's a strikingly bad deal for taxpayers, primarily because this tax deferral, the deferral of tax payments, is benefiting high-income earners. And they would say that this money might be better spent trying to shore up Social Security. So that's where all of this comes from. Do I think that we're going to get rid of the 401ks? I do not. I think it's an important part of Americans' retirement savings. I understand the argument made by both of these economists. I think it's a good argument, but the reality is we have a retirement crisis in the United States. So having these 401ks are a really important piece. And, so what can we do? What can all of us do, going back to that chart that shows how relatively low the median balance is in a 401k? And I think one of the reasons that it's low is, right, when we're first starting off, we're not making much money. However, our expenses and our responsibilities are low, so saving 20% might be possible. But then when we buy our first house, when we start a family, that's an expensive time in our lives, and it's natural that savings rates are going to go down. But then when the kids head off and we're empty nesters and college has been paid for, boy, starting to stockpile away that money and getting to 20% or more is super important. It's also super important you think about when you want to retire, which is why I made this video here, 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in that video.